Hello dear friends, in today's video I'm going to explain how I mix skin tones. There are huge varieties of skin tones that you can mix using different color sets. So the first one, I want to explain you that method that I used more than a decade using quite simple set of watercolor paint, and I use it widely while teaching fashion illustration. As well, I want to show you another example using Holbein specific color, John Brilliant. And then I want to mix skin tone using very basic color set, just in case if you don't have any colors that I will be using in my first and second explanation of color mixing. So let's start. First of all, I wanted to say that there are plenty of unique skin tones, so it's impossible to explain how to mix each of them. And I want to start first sharing that skin tone that I personally used for myself while teaching my courses and while I'm painting portraits. So I basically use these three main colors. It's ochre, it's closer to yellow ochre. I use cool pink. If you don't have cool pink, it's like it's slightly a cooler shade of red, so you can still try to use a regular red color. If I have a choice, I prefer to use a little bit cooler shade and purple color. So first, let's take a look at that specific colors that I have. The main color, I'm gonna use yellow ochre. If you don't have exactly the same shade of ochre, you can try golden ochre or any other ochre that you might have in your set. Add some amount of water. So this will be our basic paint that we're gonna use for this first, my favorite skin tone. I will color here specific colors that I'm using, so we will see initial colors. Because we work with watercolor, don't forget to add some amount of water. Any color that you use in watercolor is supposed to be more transparent, semi-transparent. And especially if you work with a skin tone, you will need to play with varieties of tints and shades. And that's why I want to try to create some amount of tints, neutrals, and shades that I will apply for like a very quick sketch of the face, so you could see how they are layering and how it works while you add in shades to the neutrals or to tints. So as the first color, I'm gonna use light yellow ochre with some amount of water. Next color, which will be full pink color. For the pink color, I'm not gonna use it as a main basic color, so I'm not using that huge amount as I use for ochre. That's why I put it in a separate part in the palette. But the color by itself looks like this. So it's a little cooler, and because my aim is to mix more neutral skin tone, so the second is cooler red. So if you don't have cooler red, you can use just basic red, and probably will need to make it a little cooler than after. I'm adding small amount first, then mixing it well to see how the color looks like, and then I decide if I want to add a little more of pink or a little bit less. But as I created these squares, which are the first one with some ochre looks like a square for the purpose to demonstrate to you that that will be the main color that you use, and you will need a bigger amount of ochre rather than pink. Another thing I would recommend while you're mixing the skin tone, or basically like any color, it's harder to see what color will look like then in the end once it gets dry, when you look at the color once it's in the palette. So what I usually do, I take a piece of paper the same or very similar to that paper that I use for the portrait that I'm painting. And then I just tried different shades till I found that shade that I specifically like. Yeah, because it might be slightly more of pink, slightly less of pink, and you will create also a lot of different tints or shades. I will try first this on this side because it's not my final color. And you might notice that because you use cooler pink and ochre color, it looks a little closer to orange, but it's not that bright as orange already. And what we want for the face, that the color looks more neutral. It doesn't look too obvious orange, let's say, or yellow. That's why we usually mix in a little more amount of paint. Although in some parts of the portraits, even this specific color might look quite good. Because for me the color it still looks a little too orange, I would like to make it even more neutral. And what I'm gonna do now to use the third color that you be surprised, I'm gonna use this purple. And purple paint is usually very intense, more intense than pink and ochre, so you will need a really small amount. At least what I would recommend to add a little more water. Don't make it too watery, otherwise it will be very light and too watery for the neutrals of what we are mixing now. But try to add like a very small amount. And if it's not enough, you can always add a little bit more. Or if you feel like you add too much of purple, you can just go back and add the first and second color again to dissolve purple. That's what I have in this moment. So it looks less orange now, as you see. And it's quite still intense and bright. So I would like to wait till this paint will get dry, so I will see more specific color. Remember that for the face you will use very light tints, something in between tints and shades. So once you mix in the first color, it might look still too dark, and in this case it's good because you can add more water and make this the same color, just much lighter than what you have, and it will be more neutral color. So if it looks a little too brownish, for me, even I still would wait a little bit till it gets dry. I will add just slight amount of pink to see how the tone is changing. I like it a little more now. And again, I would wait just a little bit till the paint will get dry to see how the color looks in the natural conditions once it will get dry on the paper. And now, while I'm waiting, I want to just quickly explain you why I add purple to colors when I'm mixing skin tone. So here you will need to use a little bit of your knowledge of color theory, which is really important for you if you work with colors. And in our case, I would like you to take a look at which colors we used first. So it was ochre, which is something in between yellow and orange, just not that intense. And red color or pink color, whatever you use. So it means we are closer to this completely warm half of the color wheel. The main color that we use is still over here between yellow and orange. So I would like to look at the color that is totally on the opposite side of the color wheel. Complementary color, and it will be somewhere between purple and blue. In our case, because I want to make color a little bit less bright, be it more neutral, so we'll add some small amount of complementary color, something closer to blue and purple, to neutralize that yellowness or orange touch of the color. In this case, this color theory works well and really helping me to make neutral colors. Now let's go back to our skin tone mixing. I already noticed that the colors that I used before for the skin tone, they got dry, so now they're slightly lighter, and I could see the difference, especially between the first color that I mixed without using purple and while I added purple and then a little bit of cool pink. I still like the last one the most. It looks quite dark. Again, I want to mention that you will need skin tones that will be lighter and darker, so you will need all the variety. And I would use this probably for neutrals or like very light shades. Again, it will depend on how light or dark that specific skin tone that you use. I would add again a little bit of pink just to see the variety. Once they will get dry, we will see the difference a little bit more. I will try the third one again, going back for a little more of purple. We'll use some amount of this paint and we'll make it a little more transparent, adding some amount of water. And we'll see how it looks like if I make it more transparent. I'm kind of going back to what I have for neutrals, and now the last one was with slightly more of purple. Now I'm adding a little more of pink, and again just light one drop of water and very tiny bit of. Before I will move to shades for that skin tone, what I'm gonna do now, just to cover the whole face with that lightest tone that I created. That's actually the one where I used just a little more of ochre. So then once you start to cover the whole face, you see if it looks enough light. So I always have to remember that once watercolor gets dry, the paint will look a little bit lighter. But if I want to make like some really light kind of pale skin tone, I would just add more water, making it a little more transparent. Another thing that I would like you to keep in mind, that it's much easier and safer if you start to work with very light tones and then gradually adding darker shades and building up this depth, because it's much easier to add shades to the color than making the color lighter. Sometimes it works pretty well with what you mix, but sometimes when you layer in, you might realize that then neutrals or shades might look too bright again. And while I'm waiting for the side to get dry, I would focus now on shades. I would use like kind of the same base that I already created and just will make that paint a little more intense. So it means like I cannot take off water back, but I can add a little bit more of paint. And I kind of going back, adding first some ochre, a little bit of that cool pink that I have, and purple. So I made it a little darker already, and I see that the paint is a little more intense. I tried to go for even slightly darker shades. I use thicker paint with less of water because I need to create that paint that to mix that color that won't be so transparent. Yeah, the first, like, it looks my shades a little too light. First here, that looks still neutral, but a bit darker. And even darker shade. Just go back again for same paint, the same colors that I use, just making it less watery. All right, that shade look already much darker. So I'm gonna try it here, wait till it get dry, and then to compare what I have. Maybe even making some darker shades for some very specific parts of the face. But mainly it looks quite good for the difference between tints. They're quite neutral, quite light. Now that had got dry, so I could see that it's quite light for me. Neutrals are also neutral and just a little bit darker than the tints that I used. Now I would like to see how it will work for me with those skin tones once I will start layering and build up depth in the face. And for half of the face, I will use neutrals, so they are a little darker than tints. Just trying to make it a little quicker, so kind of sketchy, not to spend too much time on it. And I cover hair also, just making them a little darker, and a little bit shades over here on the face. If you would like to watch step-by-step video how to draw small scale face with watercolor, I will copy and save link for you in the description below this video. And for the other half of the face, I'm going to use the same tints that I used to cover the first layer of the head. So sometimes it works well that just you layer in, and because it's a second layer, so it definitely will be darker than the first layer. I'm waiting for that part to get dry to see how exactly it works with neutrals and tints. I realized that I forgot to add purple as the main color that I used for the skin tone. And remember that for the purple you add in even less than full pink, because the color by itself is more intense. I would color like even half of the rectangle that I prepared. So now when the main palette got dry, you could clearly see all tints, neutrals and shades, and it's up to you if you're gonna start with something very light or like a little darker tone of the skin, or if it will be something much darker like one of these shades. It's still possible to create something in between by adding a very slight amount of water. In my case, I probably will add just a little bit of like very dark shades for like very specific parts of the face, and that probably will work for the lighter skin. And before I started with the skin tone second combination, I would like to ask you guys to give a thumb up to this video. It will help me a lot to promote my channel and to share valuable information with other people. I would like to suggest you to experiment a little bit more if you want to create richer palette for skin tones. One of my suggestions would be just to explore not only different amount of water, creating a lot of tints and shades, but also slightly change the hue of their color. I'll show you how you can experiment. For example, I'm going to add one of the greens that I have to that basic color that you already have, because it's quite neutral. So if you add in a little bit, you can explore, like to see all other shades that you might create. So after I added a little bit of like warm green color, you see how the skin tone became a little bit more warmer, if it's something that you're interested in. Or you can try some different combinations. For example, if you want to make something cooler, instead of adding more purple, I would try to go for some darker, cool red color. Again, starting with a small amount, and then if you like it, you can add a little more, or it's just the way of experimenting and adding for some small amount to see how it works. But let's compare. And in this case, it looks quite cooler, this shade, and that might work also if you make it probably a little bit lighter. I will try some cooler shades and we'll use one of the blues. It's quite light, also looks pretty much neutral. And I just mix two last colors together. Depends so much on the pigment, how good the quality of the paint you use, that how many different pigments you can mix together so the color looks still quite clean. And in my case, that's like I like the last one a little bit more than this two for how neutral it is, but again, it always depends on the specific skin tone that you're looking for. And now I'm trying a little bit more of bluish and greenish together to the basic tone, basic color that I had. It's still quite cool shade of brown, which might work well also for the skin. Once paint go dry, you can see those real colors, how it will look like in your painting. And that's why I always recommend before you start to work on your artwork to pre-mix colors and to try them on the paper. And another color that I recently started to use when I draw the full body is a John Brilliant #2, if to be very specific. I have this tube in my 30 colors Holbein artist watercolor set, but I'm sure if you will like to try this paint, you can buy the tube just separately and to try this color. So what's interesting is John actually means yellow. In practice, the color, I wouldn't call that it's yellow. For me, it looks like kind of peach pastel, closer to very light orange yellow color rather than just yellow. First, I would like just to try this color, the pure color by itself. And as I mentioned before, that the color looks quite pastel tone, and it seems like a little bit like it has some white pigment in it. So actually, John Brilliant is opaque. It's not fully or semi-transparent as previous colors that I used in the first color combinations for the skin tone. So you might see that color looks a little too bright. It might work in some parts of the face in combination with some other colors, but probably by itself it would be too bright. So what I would do, just add more water, and it's like kind of a secret of making skin tone from a lot of colors, just making it more transparent. And for the first layer, it can be quite good color to try. I would wait till the paint will get dry so we could see more real colors. Although I already see that by itself, color is a little too bright, and especially if I need some darker shades of the same color, probably I won't use it just the way it is without mixing it with anything else and keeping it not transparent, opaque, as you could see here. So in this case, I want to try just some different color combinations to make it more neutral. And I want to try a couple of colors from the same watercolor set that I have, and one of them is Rose Madder. I will mix some amount of Rose Madder with John Brilliant and want to see how it will look like. I'm sure that if I will add some more water, the color will be quite nice for some pale skin tones. Another color combination I want to try to make a neutral skin tone by adding a tiny bit of Terra Verde. It's also quite opaque, and it will be interesting to see how one opaque will mix with another one. Just pay attention to add like a really tiny bit, and I think I added already quite a lot. I aim just slightly change the color. I added like really tiny bit of the greenish color, and let's try what we have now at the moment. Let's wait till it will get dry to see how it will look. My another suggestion would be to mix it with tiny bit of cobalt violet light. It's also from the same set that I have. I go for a very tiny bit of violet, and I'm adding just a little bit, making it a little more neutral. While I'm waiting that paint will get dry, I want to try one of these tones to cover the whole face and see how some shades will work on it. So that was my first color combination, and I still have tiny bit of all of them. And the third one here on the bottom. While they're mixing all together, it actually creates really nice gradient. So while the face is getting dry, I want to try a couple of combinations for the shades. I will try them on the back side here. I'm adding tiny bit of bright violet, and you might notice that I added less water, or actually I didn't try to add more water. Color looks a bit thicker. It has a touch of opaque. If I will use quite a lot of this color, I think it will be too bright. I still want to make it a little bit more neutral. And I add a tiny bit of ultramarine deep. And you see how dramatically color changed. Mixing first and third colors together. And it looks a little more neutral for the shades. I tried a quick sketch with all the three neutral colors as the basic layer, and then adding shade. That was the last color that I created from this four. They actually fit quite well. It was a little difficult then to work on the hair because the color is opaque and it's not mixing that properly, but it gives some pastel touch also for the hair. And that's one of the options, making John Brilliant from Holbein a little bit more neutral, and I think it can be used pretty well for the skin tones. And one more skin tone color combination I want to mix by using only primary colors. So that will be great for those who do not have any special artistic watercolor sets. If you have just any watercolor and you have three basic primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. So I want to try if it's still possible to create some nice skin tone by using these three primary colors. So these three colors that we're going to use now for this color combination. And the first step, I was thinking, if I normally would use, instead of yellow ochre, why don't I try to make something closer to yellow ochre? And I want to go slowly by adding very tiny amount of red and blue, and go back again and again till I make something that will be closer to substitute yellow ochre. It looks like very warm yellow color, but still a little bit not the same as ochre. So we'll add tiny bit again the red and tiny bit of the blue. So actually by accident I added a little more blue in the very end, and I want to see if it's changing. It actually becomes a little closer to ochre. Just tiny bit of red, mix it all together, and I will put here all the color transformation, let them dry to see how final color will look like. And meanwhile, I'm gonna try to substitute purple, which will be much easier because it's basically red and blue. So the purple color will depend exactly on uh, the specific red and blue that you have, because they might have slightly different shades. And my combination makes something closer to the color you could see. I will try again, but I don't think I can get something more closer to purple color that I used previously. So it looks just a little darker, but it's still not totally the same purple that I had before. And now I will try to mix a little bit of that purple that I created with some good amount of ochre that I created. Add in a little more. Still quite far away from color that I would like to mix for the skin tone. I will continue by adding more of this purple. So actually I'm gonna move to the color side of the palette where I mixed purple, because I have here already some amount of ochre. So let me see what we have. Well, a little closer, but still looks a little brownish. I'm adding again a little of both red and blue. And continue with red and blue. And I want to add some more water. Make and paint a little more transparent. And it seems like I already got something closer to more neutral skin tone, and adding even a little more water to be quite light and nice neutral color. So I would wait till it will get dry to see like the full gradation, starting from making ochre, purple, and then mixing them in the combinations together. I would like to emphasize that it was done over this area. It was a little bit more of purple than ochre. So in this specific color combination, but using only primary colors, then once I reached the purple, I had to add tiny bit of ochre to the purple, not opposite, because this purple is obviously a little different than what I had in my very first, my favorite skin tone combination. And very tiny bit of blue to my last combination, and the color turns into just slightly cooler, and it seems like a pretty nice neutral skin tone. Please leave in the comments which color combination was the most interesting for you. Don't forget to like this video if you didn't do yet. And meanwhile, I'm wishing you a good day. See you in my next video. Bye bye.